Have you ever been asked to do something so unthinkable by the person you trust most that you begin to wonder if you ever truly knew them at all? I used to believe marriage meant safety, that when my husband looked me in the eye and promised to stand by me, I could close my eyes and fall backward, knowing he would catch me. But what do you do when the person who vowed to protect you is the very one who pushes you into the fire? The night it happened still echoes inside me like a secret I'll never shake. I remember the flickering light in our living room in Manchester, the way my husband's voice dropped lower than I'd ever heard it before. His eyes held a desperation that frightened me, and his words felt like a knife sliding under my skin. You have to do this, for me, for us. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, and the "this" he spoke of involved his father, his proud, controlling, and cold father who had never once treated me like I belonged in their family. I sat there frozen, staring at my husband,
wondering how love could twist itself into something that made me feel like a pawn in someone else's game.
My pulse throbbed in my ears as questions piled on top of each other. Why was he asking me? Why me of all people? And how could he possibly believe that crossing such a line wouldn't shatter us forever? I didn't know then that saying yes would unravel not just my marriage, but the fragile image I held of myself. And even now, long after the dust has settled, I still whisper the same question into the dark. Why did I let him make me do it? Before everything, my name is Claire. I was 28 when all this happened, living in a red brick townhouse just outside the city. On paper, I had what most people would call a good life. I was married to James, a man I once believed carried all the gentleness in the world in his smile. We had been together for 5 years, and though we'd had our share of struggles, I truly believed he was my partner in every sense of the word. But what I didn't see, or maybe refused to see, was the shadow of his father looming over everything we did. His father, Richard, was a man of presence, in his late 60s, but still walking with the stiff pride of a general. He rarely spoke without turning it into a lecture. From the beginning, he had looked at me as though I were an intruder, someone who had stolen his son's loyalty. Every family dinner was a performance. Richard would sit at the head of the table, his voice dominating the room. He never missed a chance to remind James of the family's name, of responsibilities beyond our marriage. Sometimes I would catch James's eyes across the table, silently begging me to let it slide, and I always did, because I loved him. But love makes you blind. It makes you excuse things you shouldn't. I told myself Richard's coldness didn't matter as long as James and I were united. Except, James wasn't as free from his father as I wanted to believe. It began with small things. James switching jobs because his father disapproved, investing our savings into ventures Richard suggested, agreeing to host family gatherings even when I begged for just one quiet weekend. I told myself it was harmless, but each time, a little piece of me was pushed aside. The breaking point came one evening when James sat me down with a look I'd only ever seen once before, on the day he asked me to marry him. Except this time, the glimmer in his eyes wasn't love. It was fear. He explained in half sentences, tripping over his words, until finally, it came out. His father had been pressuring him into something James didn't want to do. And instead of saying no, instead of shielding me, James had decided I would be the solution. When I realized what he was asking, what line he wanted me to cross, I felt the ground fall away beneath me. I laughed at first. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd that my mind refused to process it. I thought James must have been joking or exaggerating. But the way he leaned forward, his hands gripping mine so tightly my knuckles ached, told me he was deadly serious. "James," I whispered, my throat dry. "You can't be asking me this. Not about your father, not about him." His eyes darted to the door, as though even the walls might betray us. "Claire, you don't understand. If you don't, he'll destroy everything. My job, our home, the investments. I'll lose everything he controls. And if I lose it, we both do, so that was it. This wasn't just about loyalty or love. It was about survival. His survival, which he had tied to mine." For days afterward, the weight of his request sat on me like a stone. I avoided Richard's calls, his visits, his piercing eyes that seemed to know more than I wanted him to. At night, James would reach for me, his body warm beside mine, but I felt miles away from him. Every time he whispered, "Trust me, just do this one thing," I wanted to scream. I began noticing how Richard lingered longer when we spoke, how his gaze carried a challenge. Was he aware of what James had asked me? Was this all some cruel test? One evening, I found myself alone with Richard in the kitchen. The air was thick with silence. He leaned on the counter, his voice low. "James always was weak. But you know what it means to sacrifice for family, don't you?" My stomach turned. It was confirmation. This wasn't just James's idea. Richard had orchestrated it, planting it like a seed in his son's desperate heart. And James, too afraid to stand against him, had passed the burden on to me. I wanted to run. I wanted to pack my bags and leave them both behind. But love, or maybe fear disguised as love, chained me. I told myself it would be just once, that I could live with the guilt if it meant protecting James. But I underestimated the way betrayal seeps into your bones. The night I finally gave in, I felt like a stranger inside my own body. James's hand rested on my shoulder, guiding me forward as though I were walking into battle. My chest burned, my throat tight with unspoken words. I wish I could tell you that I was strong enough to refuse, that I turned and walked away, but I didn't. I let myself be pushed into a moment that would scar me forever. What happened that night wasn't about love or intimacy. It was about power, control, and the quiet destruction of trust. And the worst part? James watched it happen. He stood there, silent, while I carried the weight of his weakness. Afterward, I couldn't look at either of them. My reflection in the mirror felt like someone else's face, someone tainted, someone complicit. James tried to hold me, whispering, "You saved us, Claire. You saved everything." But all I felt was hollow. The revelation came days later, when I overheard Richard speaking on the phone. His words cut through me like glass. "She'll do anything for him. That's her flaw, and that's my leverage." It wasn't just about that night. It was about control, manipulation, and keeping me bound to them both. James hadn't just sacrificed me. He had made me part of his father's twisted game. And suddenly I understood. It was never about saving us. It was about keeping Richard's power alive. And James, the man I thought I knew, had chosen to be his accomplice. In the weeks that followed, I moved through life like a ghost. I cooked, I cleaned, I went to work, but everything felt muted. James acted as though nothing had changed, as though my silence meant forgiveness. But inside, I was unraveling. One night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized something with startling clarity. I could never unlive that moment. I could never unhear Richard's smug words, or unfeel the betrayal that had seeped into my skin. And yet, I had a choice. I could stay, pretending the sacrifice was worth it, or I could reclaim what little of myself remained. Leaving wasn't easy. James begged, promised, swore he would change. But I had seen the truth too clearly. Love built on fear isn't love at all. It's a prison. As I packed my bags, I looked around at the home we had built together, and for the first time, I didn't feel sorrow. I felt strength, because walking away wasn't just about escaping James or his father. It was about saving myself. Even now, when the nights get quiet, I think about the woman I was before all of this, the woman who believed love could weather any storm. I grieve her innocence, but I don't long to be her again, because innocence can be stolen, but strength, you earn that through fire. And so I close this chapter with a truth I never wanted to learn. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers, but from the ones we love most. And when it does, the bravest thing you can do is walk away.